Welcome, everyone. And today we're going to talk about something I think all of you probably have heard: the first 30 seconds, the first 60 seconds, how critical they are, the first impression that you make, and almost it's made instinctively. And is it the most important impression? A lot of people do say so, and research also shows that. So today we're going to let's learn how to ace it. We've got ace facilitator, and we've got one of my favorite ones today. We've got Shyamli Rator with us. She is a select pool of certified facilitators for YPO. And if you don't know what YPO is, it's the Young Professional Organization. It's the largest CEO network. You've got it all across India. People are vying and are pre-selected to get in, and she's a facilitator for them. She's also a facilitator for Harvard Business Publishing, which does all of their courses in India. She's a visiting faculty at MDI. And so this session is definitely a not to miss. In this session, you're going to learn the art and science of handling interviews effectively and learn how to navigate the unstated rules of the workplace. So as I've said, I mean, Shyamli has so much experience, and she's actually got a lot of experience in facilitating workshops all through from, I think, all levels, and especially for CEOs across the globe in the personal growth and actually in the authenticity area. She has consulted over 500 global teams with the Harvard Publishing arm, and she's also a very, very popular visiting faculty for MBA students. So Shyamli, with that, I welcome you to Sipping Thoughts. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Sukriti. I'm really delighted to be here too.
And today I was also nervous because I said I have to really up my game. It's the first impression that I make.
Well, you're looking gorgeous.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. So let's get right into it, Shyamli, because you're a leadership facilitator and you train some of the most well-known CEOs. What are the biggest challenges you see, especially now with COVID times, facing the senior leadership teams?
And that's a great question, Sukriti. So a couple of things that I'm seeing across board for senior level leadership teams. Learning agility, how to constantly unlearn and learn. Two, ability to deal with very ambiguous situations where you might not have a response or a pre-plated decision. C, ability to take people along, and especially in the pandemic when everything was moved virtually. So a lot about how do we really create a sense of followership with the people. So these are the three that I see as big areas.
And let's talk about the topic today. Why this topic? And why is this topic so close to your heart, acing the first impression?
So two things, there are two elements to the topic. One is acing the first the impression, and the second is what are some of the unstated rules of the workplace. So I'm going to talk about the first one first. The whole of last year, my daughter was working. It was her first job, and I saw her floundering and crying, literally shedding tears of blood because she was not able to manage her stakeholders. So that got me thinking that, she's great in academics, but it's possibly not prepared her for what to expect. So that's the second part of our conversation today. The first part about interviews, I teach this at MDI to my MBA students, and it's something that's always a lot of curiosity as to how do we really create a bit of a presence, how do we create an impact. And at the deep-rooted sense, we all want to create a sense of I am. I'm there. So I think to me, am I there? Am I validated? Am I recognized at a fundamental level? That's where it comes from.
Fantastic. And a little bit about your journey. I think people would love to know how, I mean, of course, you've reached such a height and you are actually training for two of the best known, I mean, if you think about it, for Harvard and for YPO. So tell us a little bit about that.
So my journey started from desperation, Sukirti. I was 44 years old, but that time I had been working for about 24 years in the corporate world. Unfortunately, I had a very toxic boss in my last corporate assignment. I was the regional director for South Asia, and things had gone south. And some way I thought, this is it. I can't work with this kind of toxicity and anxiety. So I was in New York at that time. I remember after a meeting, and on the flight back home, I said, I'm going to start my own. So it started from a lot of desperation. The name of my firm, Sidman, I'd gone to my mentor, and he says, let it be the energy of your children, Siddharth and Mansi. So it started from there. and it's been nurtured with a lot of determination. So a lot of focus on what is it that I don't want to do in the field of facilitation and coaching, what is it that I want to focus on.
So we are
So
very fortunate to have you today. Like I said, I mean, we're getting training today from the best of the best. So thank you for being with us on Sipping Thoughts, and I hand it over to you.
thank you and welcome to all of you. I can see about 54 of you. I'm so delighted to see all of you here today and talk to you. So I have broken up our conversation into three parts. One about interviews. What are some of the things that we need to be looking at? And the focus for that is primarily from many of you who could be going for your first or your second interview. The second piece I want to talk about is a bit on what are some of the unstated rules? So what are some of the things maybe we should be doing when we are joining the workplace initially? And the last part is some of the things you should not be doing. Unfortunately, I did that. So that's just coming from my learning as well. So those are the three things we are going to talk about. So my first question to all of you, let's first talk about the first piece about interviews. And I'm just curious to hear from you via chat. What do you think is your biggest challenge when it comes to interviews? So go ahead and chat in. What do you think is your biggest challenge specific to handling interviews or when you think about the word interview? Go ahead, hashtag one word, one sentence. If you want, you can raise your hand and jump in into conversation.
For me, I think
Self-doubt.
it's feeling a connect. And,
Mhm.
so that one, self-doubt, Deepthi says, Varun says, how to be authentic.
Authentic selves, building trust. And these are great comments there. And let me just maybe Varun, if you would just want to jump and elaborate a bit on what you said. How to
Let
be
me
authentic
unmute
self.
him. I am just,
Yeah. If you can,
go ahead, Varun.
Varun, if you want to just jump in.
Sure. Thank you. So what I've actually experienced is many a times I think what I try to do is just kind of, fit in and maybe kind of, just cast that perfect impression that, everything has to be perfect, etc., which honestly actually very much takes away and lands me very far from who I am. Right. And honestly, it has not worked very well for me. But still, I'm always in this kind of, conundrum that, okay, how do I really project myself?
And you're raising a wonderful point, and those are some of the chats I'm seeing that do I want to create this perfect persona? And
Yeah.
is that really what an interview is looking at? And I want to just demystify a little bit of that myth as we get along as well. And thank you, Varun, so much for being my warm call volunteer and speak up. Let's just look at some of the chats here about how to start. Maybe I'm not good enough. So a lot of thoughts about being an imposter syndrome, possibly, that do I really need what it takes to be in the job? So I want to break this up in three elements. The first element is before we go for the interview, right? So there are three parts to it. Before you go for your interview, during your interview, and I want to answer some of these questions which are coming in. And the third piece is after the interview. So we're going to talk both from a process and what's happening in your mind. And feel free to keep on chatting and asking questions as we get along. So the first thing I would invite you to do is when we go for the interview, the point about why I really want this job, the point with Sunaina you were talking about making the move. So I was in headhunting business for a couple of years. And I found, and this is all senior leadership roles, that many people were making a move primarily from a monetary perspective. So that's the first thing I would invite you to think about, that if you're making a move, is it only money? And based on our life cycles, we have different needs. So trying to understand a little bit about that, because money is a very fickle mistress. You get that and then you start getting bored and then you want something else. So try to really think about the job you're looking at. Is it really matching your strengths? So that's one. So a little bit about why do you want to make the move? The second piece is once you said, okay, I want to go ahead, then maybe you want to do a little bit of preparation, which is in terms of, am I looking at data now? We have the internet, we have a company websites, we have a lot of information, Twitter. So a lot of information where you really can start narrowing down what is the company, what is the industry looking like, what is the culture. So a lot of people say we culture eats strategy for breakfast. So, are you going to fit in culturally within the organizations? And I'm just giving an example of my daughter. So she used to go for a lot of curricular activities in the evening, and she joined a startup where she was told it's going to be a demanding work life. Unfortunately, it sucked her in completely. So it was like 15 hours a day. Now, is that something some of us can maybe handle? Some of us cannot, right? So understanding a little bit about the culture of the organization becomes extremely important. So that's the first thing I would invite you to do. The second thing I would invite you to do is also, if you know who's going to be interviewing you, having a look at the profile of the person, because you do want to create a rapport with the individual when you're meeting. So doing a little bit of your research on the individual as well. Now, so that's part one. Part two is, all right, you're coming for the interview. And just before the interview, the question that I'm seeing, I'm feeling stressed or all these things are happening. So there are two things I'm inviting you to think. Now imagine when you sit for your interview before, so you're not even walked into the room. Typically, what is your posture like? Before, so you're sitting outside the interview room, right? So just give me a snapshot. What would be happening in your head? What's happening in your body?
If some of you want to turn on your cameras, you can even show us what
Please turn on your cameras. I love to see your faces, so it's always great to see your faces. Confused, Manju? Okay, so confused in your mind. So confusion is about what, Manju?
I'm asking her to unmute. Go ahead, Manju. Abhijit says butterflies in his stomach.
So a little bit of that anxiety, and that's normal. The adrenaline is pumping in. We are getting those a lot of adrenaline, so palms get sweaty. A lot of thoughts coming up. It's all about something like an evaluation. It's the point that many of you saying, "Are we good enough? You're not good enough." So now physiology, our physical elements really change the way we think. So some simple techniques I would advise you to do: not to have tea or coffee before, because as it is, you're in an anxious state, and if you're having more of that, it's further increasing your anxiety. So minimize that. Sip on cold water. Thank you, Sukriti, as you're doing right now. So make water your best friend before you going for your interview. Two, have you prepared in your mind about what is it that you're going to be talking about? Now, this is something very interesting that we just heard right now from Varun, that I want to be authentic. Of course, we want to be authentic, but we have to be prepared. So typically, what are a couple of your unique strengths that you think are suited for the role? And what are your narratives or your story around it? So a person is not interested in, if says, okay, tell me about yourself. I mean, I'm not going to recite my litany of, I did my MBA, I'm an engineer, I did work here, blah, blah, blah. It's so boring. But if I say, I'm a risk taker, and here's what I did in my college, I went on this trip, or I was part of this great project where there was no net, but this is what I did. I have captured my essence. So are we preparing for what are the 2 or 3 of the strengths? Why am I suited for the role? So some of those questions, and the way I would invite you to prepare for it is by writing down in script, not in your head. Preparation is not going to happen when you're in your interview room. It's going to happen when you are actually before, and you kind of scripted your answers to the questions. And I'll reference some questions on the screen just in a bit. The third piece is, now typically when we are sitting in the interview before, we get hunched. Do you see the posture? It's like closed posture. It's called a little bit of, if you've seen Amy Cuddy's work, it's a closed posture. And the moment our postures get closed, we become defensive. That means I'm seeing less power in myself. I get into a less power position. So Amy Cuddy, she's a professor at Harvard, and I will just share some of the slides in a bit. She talks about power postures. So she says the moment you increase your body space, the moment you lean back, you make yourself bigger, the larger the feeling of confidence that comes in you is unmistakable. So I'm going to invite you to do a quick experiment. Just take a minute, and as you're sitting, just see how you're sitting right now. Yeah. And now sit back. And try to increase your body space. Make your chest larger, make your arms bigger. If you can stand up and strut your stuff a little bit. Okay, just do that. Just do it for a couple of seconds and breathe in a little more. And now tell me, are you facing any change, very quick change in how you're feeling at this point, just by doing this little bit of experiment? So Kirti, I saw you doing that.
Definitely. I'm feeling more relaxed.
Felt immediately relaxed. Now, so I facilitate, as I mentioned, workshops for all these so-called hotshots of the world. And it's really scary because every time you're going, you say, oh my God, it's like an interview. And you'll be. So what I do is, and this is a secret, I lock myself in the loop, and then I do a little bit of power postures and say, okay, you're the best, in front of the mirror. So prime myself before I walk into my conference room, and that works wonders. Immediately, my stress levels come down, and I start feeling more with myself, right? So thank you, Abhijit, for that. I just want to now quickly share a couple of slides on what we've spoken about, and then I'm going to go deeper into our conversation as well. In the meantime, if you have any questions on what we've discussed, feel free to add in as well. So the agenda, as I said, we're going to talk about these three things. I've already partially spoken about the first one. So 3 phases of an interview: before, during, after. We are going to, right now, we are focusing on before the interview, what you do, which is preparation. So what about the company culture? I cannot emphasize enough, because again, in my headhunting days, I saw many people wanting to resign because of the culture. What are the industry trends? What do you think would be the challenges in the job? Because this helps you ask good questions during the interview, right? And also, if possible, information about the interviewer. So we've discussed this. Also, in terms of your preparation, are you relaxing your mind and body? So that means less of caffeine, little bit of meditation, or just a visualization exercise. So the way I like to do a visualization, I want to close my eyes and see myself in the conference room, in the workshop, that I'm standing tall, proud. So I do this mental visualization before I even go for my workshop. So doing a little bit of that, right? And then the power postures that we've spoken about. So this is an example from Amy Cuddy's TED Talk. So if you see on the extreme left, this is a Wonder Woman. This is a classic power posture. Now you can't maybe do it outside somewhere, but what it just means is, are we opening our body space? If you look at the second photo in between, you know clearly who has the power and who does not have the power just by looking at the photo. And then the third one is of Shakira, I think, again making a very powerful posture. So specific to interviews, do you see the change in the body language of this person? Right, from the extreme left to the right, immediately we can see there's a change. So how are you even sitting before we get into the room makes a lot of difference. Okay, so we've discussed that. We've discussed all this also, that, go around, strut your stuff a little bit and see what you're feeling. I'm going to stop sharing, and then for a bit, and then just check. That was Beyonce. All right, so Naina. So, you see I'm a bit dated. So thank you for that. So
we're showing our age.
Yeah, good for that. So I have increased my general knowledge, so Naina, with this. Okay. So let's move on now to the second part, that why do you think an interviewer is asking you questions? What do you think is the job of being in an interview? What is the need for an interview? Go ahead and chat. You have to find the right person, but what does the interview do actually? Yeah, to find it. So that's the end result, that you have to find the suitable, but what's the process through which it happens? To learn more about you. Absolutely. So from an interview perspective, it is, I would say, there are so many theories about it. It is, am I establishing my trust? Am I establishing my credibility? Am I establishing that I am the best person for the job? And that comes from the moment when maybe Sukirti can see I'm a trustworthy partner, right? So here, what are some of the things we need to be looking at from a trust equation? Now, there are many equations of trust, but specifically from an interviewing frame, there are 3 C's that I like to talk about. So the first is clarity. The second is curiosity. The third is confidence. And a couple of chats that I had checked right in the beginning about why, what's your biggest stumbling block? I think many of those questions would be covered here. So let's talk about this one by one. Clarity, we'll talk about curiosity, and we will talk about confidence. So first thing is clarity. Now imagine a question, okay, tell me a bit about yourself. Okay, that's a very standard, cliched question, but a lot of interviews ask that. And it's so boring if you start reciting the litany of your entire life history from where you started to where you are, and you just regurgitate what's on your CV. It's not going anywhere. So remember, I spoke about being very clear about the stories you're going to talk about. So being very clear when you're talking about three things maybe you want to highlight about your life. So why do I say three things? So when you're being clear, clarity about what you want to share. Yeah, so that we can all remember. So I use a power of three. So let's do a little experiment right now. And I'm going to start sharing my screen with all of you. So let's move on into this model that we're talking about during the interview: confidence, clarity, curiosity, and confidence. So tell me, how many have been cut off in a meeting or being told to come to the point while speaking? A quick chat, yes or no? Just go ahead and keep on chatting in. What I'm seeing. Okay, thank you, and Anshika. What about the others? Very quickly, just yes or no. Okay, a couple of yeses I'm seeing, right? How many of you fumbled for words during an informal or a formal conversation? Sometimes you fumble, right? And sometimes no. And how many of you have your own ideas being spoken by someone else more effectively? You say, oops, this is exactly what I was trying to say. Has that ever happened to you? It happens off and on, right? So therefore, there's a lot of research which says, are we training ourselves? Now, brevity is the soul of elegance. And I'm not stopping sharing the slides because I have a follow-up fun slide for you. Brevity is the soul of elegance. So my ability to, so let's say if an interview is asked, Shyamli, tell me a bit about the work you've done. I would say, here's what I did 5 years back. Over the last 1 year, this is what I've been doing. And this is what I'm looking forward to over the next 6 months. So very clearly, I have broken up into a power of three. Tell me a bit about yourself. So my career could be broken up into three distinct chunks. The first chunk was in international marketing. The second was in consulting. And the third is in being an entrepreneur. And here's what I did in international marketing. Here's what I did being an entrepreneur. Here's what I did being a consultant. Again, I have broken it up into chunks. Okay, so tell me very quickly now, what is this number? How many zeros were there? Go ahead. How many zeros were there? Anybody? 8?
7, 8,
right, bravo.
7, 6, 7.
Yeah.
8.
It's difficult, right? It's difficult to remember. Okay, all right. Now tell me. So a lot of the mixed questions. Now tell me how many zeros? Is this a little better?
100 million?
Yeah. Now, is this better as opposed to what we saw the first time or the second time? So very clearly, this is better. Why is this better? Why? Go ahead, anybody, just jump in. It's organized, it's absolutely. So clear thinking in your head translates into more clarity, because interviewers are meeting many people, especially at junior level jobs. There could be 50 people coming in, right? So my ability to be very precise and very clear when I talk becomes extremely important. So I would invite you to train yourself in power of three when you're talking. So not saying 1, 2, 3, you can say that, but you can say past, present, future, yesterday, today, morning, for example. So whichever shape and form. The second piece I would invite you is extremely beautiful. Actually, I teach this course about the power of storytelling. So remember, I spoke about preparation. Now, these are some standard questions that you might find. If you want, you can keep a screenshot also for this. What I normally find, these seem to be quite common, at least for entry level or junior level jobs. Maybe not so much for senior level, but some parts of this in different shapes, forms also for mid and senior level. Now, your ability to create a story about, tell me about yourself, tell me about why we should hire you. So where you can narrate a powerful story. So if the job, do you think, requires a lot of data crunching, then you want to highlight your strength about data crunching. Why should we hire you? Because I'm very good with numbers and this is what I did in the past. So you've narrated a story about yourself. What has been your biggest failure? What has been your biggest achievement? And please, don't put yourself in a pedestal. Oh, but I'm a perfectionist. So it's couched as a failure. So whatever you think has been a failure, it's okay to talk about it. But more importantly, what has been the lesson learned? Right? So these are some of the questions that we tend to see. So again, reiterating, what are the 2-3 key messages you want to convey about yourself? Now, thinking about the job, because each job interview is different, showing the connection between what you have achieved and what is needed in the job. So your story should talk about that. So when you're talking about your story, it's the situation, the task, the action, and the lesson learned. Ideally, it should be narrated in less than 2 minutes. And that can happen only, and I'm saying the word only, if you've written it down, you've practiced it, you've spoken it out. It's not going to happen out of thin air. And I'll just stop sharing right now and I'll take a pause here and check questions. Purnima, that you're saying this question annoying? Yeah, the point is the interviewer doesn't want to check your credentials. It's a very quick way of them assessing you because they can see what's written on the CV. So my ability to highlight something unique about myself. So for me, for example, when people say, okay, Shyamli, tell us about yourself. So I have my spiel really ready that this is what I do on a professional front. This is what I do on a personal front. And at heart, I'm an explorer. So my ability to, again, the power of 3, but capture the key elements about my personality, what I've done very quickly, right? So that's what this question typically is. It's like a warm-up question. Okay, any other questions which are coming in?
No, but I really like this and I want to ask this question because you gave a very good tip that your answer should not be longer than 2 minutes. Is that for almost all the questions?
I would say 2 to 3 minutes because if an interview is a half hour, again, I'm talking about junior levels, okay, right? So you think also from interviewer's perspective, if he's got maybe 20 candidates, he gives giving you half hour, 2 to 3 minutes is good. And then if needed, you can further, if there's a counter question, then go ahead and of course, give a little more details. But don't meander. Remember, so this meandering that you started from Delhi and you reach Chennai and the person is just wondering, but we were talking about Bombay and where is the correlation, right? So
So Lata is asking, where do we begin with? Because I have also interviewed many people. And so I will also say, that's also the first question I asked. So tell me about yourself. So how does one begin? I think Lata has asked that question also.
So good part would be in terms of, you can very quickly say that you can either start talking depending on whatever level you are, right? So if you're, let's say, at a junior level, you might want to talk about that from an academic perspective, this is what I've excelled in, and just highlight 1 or 2 things. Maybe I have got whatever degree or whatever, or something interesting. I'm a great team worker, that's what. And here's how, at a behavioral level, these are some of my competencies, and talk very quickly about 1 or 2 which you think are suited to the role. And where do you think you're going to fit in the role? And let's say specifically to this job, I think this is my key unique strength, which could pitch in. So maybe you can structure your talk like that. Does that resonate?
And Prachi is asking, should we mention our strengths during the introduction? And Vandana is saying, isn't it important to be more explanatory and to tell whatever we know technically? May be the interviewer wants to know more.
The technical piece is already on the piece of paper, right? So, I mean, I think unless you're going for a very highly technical job and you want to talk about that, how is that setting you apart from another person who has the same technical expertise? That's my question too. Unless you've done something extraordinary and then you want to talk about, yeah, for sure. But, if let's say So Kirti and I have the same qualification. When we're walking in and we're talking about the same degrees, and how is it creating an impact for either of us? Okay, so Amita, there's no perfect answer, but these are some of the tips that I'm trying to see. And based now, whatever is the role, whatever is the job, you might want to think through a little more and write it down for yourself. That's where your own story will emerge. Okay, any other questions anybody has? Otherwise, I want to go forward as well. So that's one part of it, right? The second part now, these role plays, I think I saw it on the chat. So role plays are good. My ability to write it down is good. So come across as being spontaneous, not rehearsed. That's one. Two, the second element is curiosity. Now, interviewers also ask you, okay, so there are two things which I notice. One, I'm so rushed to give my thoughts that I don't allow the interviewer to finish his question. So first take a pause, let the person finish. If you're getting a little wondering, paraphrase the question. So the way I hear Sukirti saying is that how do we give a perfect introduction? Is that what you want me to clarify on? And then maybe I can start. So I have given myself also a breather. I have listened. I have paraphrased. It allows me also to collect my thoughts. So that's number one. Am I giving enough time for the person to finish the question or whatever he or she is asking? That's point number one. Two, the second question is about the interviewer might say, okay, what are some of the questions that you might have for me? And then I'll say, well, nothing. That's not such a great thing to do. So be prepared because, hey, you're going to be putting in X number of hours. So you should have your questions ready. Ideally, you have come prepared with some questions. And here are some of the questions that, again, there is no perfect answer, but just some sample. What constitutes success in this job? How would you know it has been achieved? Can you give me an example of a previous success in this role, right? So trying to ask a little more thoughtful questions related to the job, to the culture of the organization, shows that you are curious to hear about the person. So that's point number two. And again, I'm stopping sharing and checking if there are any questions for me as of now. Otherwise, I'm going
Kirti
to
is asking, for each interview, do we change our answer about tell me about yourself as per the company?
I would say so. So I would say subtly, you might want to highlight those one or two things that you think that job demands, provided you have them, and that's a narrative you might want to give. So for example, when I'm talking to my clients, when I'm talking to people in HR, vis-a-vis when I talk to people in finance, like the commercial people, or when I'm talking to the business, it's a different story. I highlight about my company and my competency. I'm the same person, but I'm highlighting different aspects about it. So you might want to do that. Okay, let's move on further. And the third piece that I want to talk about, and I think these are some of the questions that I'm feeling fat or I have a lot of self-doubt which comes in. Look, nobody knows that you are facing. It's only in your head. So the first thing is, so we when the moment we start thinking about our own strengths and the way we've scripted our story, it's already creating a place of confidence. The third piece which people react to is your confidence, which is your body language, your voice, and your choice of words. So now a lot has been said about body language. I don't want to get into too much, but a couple of things. Remember power posture? So what it means is when you are in the room, you're not sprawled all over the place. You are not making yourself small, but you're composed. You're taking the space. And more importantly, you start mirroring the body language of the interviewer. So it's a very subtle technique. So why, for example, if Sukirti is now sitting like that, I'm going to sit too like this with my hands across. If she sits back, I sit back too. If she does this, I subtly, not immediately, but I do. So it's very subtle mirroring. What it does at a very subconscious level creates a lot of sense of camaraderie. So there's a huge science behind it. Unfortunately, I don't have so much of time to go into it. So, that's something that you might want to look at. The second part, which is extremely overlooked, is my voice. Now, I don't have to sound like Amitabh Bachchan, but definitely a lot about my pace. When I'm nervous, I tend to go one pace faster. As Indians, anyway, we tend to speak faster. So go one pace slower. And it's okay because it allows us to collect our thoughts. It allows us also to center ourselves. So one pace slower as opposed to going fast. Very important. And the last piece is also in terms of rapport that we talk about. So I'm going to be sharing my slide here with you, and just give me a second, please. I'm going to talk about this. So the body language, the voice, and the choice of words. So the first is your facial expressions are smiling. So very early in my career, I was given a lifesaver tip, and I was like really scared and anxious because you're facing people every day in your career, and sometimes you don't have the answers. And one of my mentors says, I'm giving you a life-saving tip. I said, okay, a career-saving tip. And I'm waiting for these beautiful pearls of wisdom. And she just said, smile. And I'm looking at her and I said, but yeah, I smiled. She said, no, Shyamli, learn to smile when you're really anxious. And when you are absolutely thunderstruck, smile. Put that on your face. So I think that was such a brilliant piece of advice. So the more we can smile, genuine one, right? The more it's reflected in, also it reduces our stress. It's giving a more calming effect even to the interviewer, and also to our ability to think through thoughts. Eye contact, gestures, posture, we've already spoken about. And then the voice, I've covered my ability to have the modulation, the pace, and the clarity. So are we going one pace slower as well? Now, this is interesting. Sometimes you're asked a difficult question and we don't have an immediate answer to this. So we start fumbling, right? So I think this is also on the chat. So here are 3 techniques. We call it a bridging technique. It's a wonderful way to buy yourself time. You can acknowledge the person. So you'll say, that's a great question. Or the fact that you're mentioning is absolutely wonderful. And I can sense your strong feelings about the subject. So you can either acknowledge or you can ask, so could you clarify, what do you mean by that? Or I'm sorry, I don't understand the meaning of this. Could you give an example around this? So you have asked, or you can adapt. So somebody might say, all right, so you're working with CEOs. What are the trends? So Sukirti's first questions, she might say. Now, I might not have trends in India. I'll say globally, these are the trends that I'm seeing. But specifically now coming to India. So first I've gone global. I've created some time to think about to the question which you asked. And then I say specifically to the Indian subcontinent, these are some of the things. So I picked on a keyword and I've taken it there as well. And then I've got it back on track. So it's a great technique, provided you practice it well as well. The easiest ones I would say is acknowledging, asking work very well every time. After the interview, here are some things that it's the person he's a human being there. So send a email or a WhatsApp if you have just a polite short thank you, not about the interview, but what was that one insight or something interesting that the person shared with you that was interesting that about that individual. So just making a little bit of that human connection works well as well. Okay, so these are some elements related to the interview, the pre, during, and the post. And I'm going to just check if I missed any questions on the chat. Kirti,
I've lined actually all of them up. So I think they're very specific to the interview. So we can take them after the job one, so they can all ask them directly.
All right. Okay. So what I want to do after this is get into what are some of the things we need to be doing when you're getting into the job. So tell me, what do you think you should be doing in your first job or your second job or the first 90 days? Any quick thoughts? Go ahead. So the other day, I'm leading a very important project, which is for Band 4Ds, which is senior level managers of an organization, doing some competency mapping. And as a result, I had to talk to the directors of that organization that what exactly is the job of this Band 4D. So I first interviewed the people who are Band 4Ds, and they all said, yeah, we have to do X, Y, Z, but nobody said we have to write white papers. None of them said. And I spoke to the directors who are the bosses and I said, well, what do you think should be, a bandy. They said, yeah, they should be thought leaders. Besides this is their day job. They should also be thinking about writing white papers, adding more value. So this was a very interesting observation for me, that often we get stuck by the JD, the job description, right? But what is it that really will create value? Are we even having the conversation with our managers, with our immediate manager? Actually, becomes very important. So therefore, the first and foremost is make your manager, build a relationship with him or her. And this is something unfortunately I did not do, and I learned it to my peril many years back. So how do we go about that? So let's do a quick quiz now. If for those of you who are working, how many questions can you answer after this? Specific to your manager's working style, does he or she prefer formal or informal, prefer emails or phone or in-person update, in-depth discussions, or likes to be involved, or delegates, thrives on conflict or avoids conflict, prioritizes deliverables or prioritizes employees? So can you answer any of these questions? Because there is a human being behind the designation. So Mansi, my daughter, was having this lot of problems, and I asked her this. I said, okay, tell me, what kind of a person is your manager? Very different from hers, but so it's your job to understand his or her style. He could have, or she could have, maybe 2-3 reportees, but you might have just one manager. So are we taking the step to to understand first the behavioral style of the person? So that's number one. So this slide gives us a little bit of a thought around that. Second piece is, when I'm talking to my manager, maybe I don't have the answers. So it's okay to have a problem, but have I thought through what could be an alternate one, an alternate two, an alternate three to a problem, a particular stumbling block? So that's one. Two, am I over delivering, under promising and over delivering? So that means doing a little more. Remember, I was giving you the example of the white papers as opposed to the day job. So what is it that I'm going to be doing a little more than what's expected of me? So sometimes you go to a restaurant, we get a nice meal, and after that the chef says, okay, complimentary dessert coming your way, and that really makes us smile, right? All of us, we say, okay, that was great. We just got something which we didn't ask for. So our ability to get that. The third one, it's very interesting. So have a good cordial relationship with your manager, but not being friends, because sometimes it sends a lot of wrong signals to our colleagues. The power imbalance can occur. So we say have a good relationship, but not be too friendly, because it can create a lot of sometimes anxiety with your peers as well. And finally, let your work be visible. So what does that mean? That means whatever you're doing, maybe at the end of the week, end of the month, end of a quarter, send out a list. Okay, here are the 3 things that I did, or 4 things, which are great. So you're capturing this information and you are sharing that with your manager on a regular basis. And once comes performance time, you have all these records of all the things you've done. Otherwise, we get stuck with a halo effect, what was done in the last quarter, as opposed to what's been done in the last year. And also you have very tangible value of what's there and what the work that you have been doing. So let your work be visible. And that means, therefore, don't be shy to talk about your work. It doesn't mean you're bragging, but you are talking about it, you're capturing it, you're putting it on record. And here are the 5 deadly sins of what not to do. So not sharing information. So I know people who think information is power. So not sharing information with their peers, or thinking just because they get it, everybody gets it. And especially now we are working virtually. That's not so. So sharing information regularly with whichever channel of communication, whether you're using Slack or you're using WhatsApp or you're using Teams, whatever it might be. Not asking for timely help. So here's a project. I was coaching somebody. There's a project coming to an end of a deadline. And she said, I don't know how to do it. So I said, what stops you from reaching out? So when she reached out, it created a huge ruckus with her managers. She said, why didn't you come to me earlier, right? So asking for timely help. Not actively reaching out to other team members. So collaborating, sharing information, giving help when needed, or building a relationship with your boss, we've already spoken about. And finally, the question that what you are asking also in your interview, how is the success going to be measured? What are some of the things that will define success for you? Have you had that conversation right up front, so that you're working towards a goal all throughout? So that's it in terms of a formal presentation from my side. I'm very happy to now spend some time taking any kind of questions that you might have for me.
I'm going to line up the questions. I'm just going to ask them to unmute. But before we go to that, I have a question for you, because these days we are in the almost all companies in the process of making the KRAs. And what I find is people actually forget about the KRAs. And then, when they come back to the end of the year or the 6 months and they realize they've done a lot of great work, but maybe have not accomplished what was on the KRA list.
Yes. So the question being, Sukirti?
So how important is it to really follow through on the KRAs?
You're going to be measured. By and large, most organizations measure your success on your KRAs. So I would say, as a best practice, please revisit it on a quarterly basis. Have a conversation, an informal conversation, and make sure you are making inroads on that. Because the come performance appraisal, that's what it's normally checked against.
I just wanted to add that. So go ahead, Amita. Go ahead. You had a question, and then we'll take Kirti and then Dr. Vandana.
Yeah, hi, Sukriti. Thank you so much. Well, good evening, ma'am. I have a question here, and it's a vital question. Now, if you're coming back to work after a few years, what would be an ample reason to give during an interview?
Once upon a time, this happened with me, that for women were not specifically expected to take breaks, right? Times have changed since then. There's a very clear thought that careers are no longer linear, especially where women are concerned. They can be meandering. And it's okay if you've maybe taken a break for personal reasons, and being candid about it, that for whatever personal reasons you might have taken a break. Does it answer your question, Amita?
All right. But, the gap, how do we answer that? The time which they normally, if you come back, what is a specific time you have to give, citing a reason? The years, or how do we accumulate that?
So in terms of if it's a very large gap, right, you might want to then create a narrative of what was the reason for you leaving the job, and therefore what happened to you after that, where you did not want to go back to workplace. Maybe you wanted to explore other options. What's a good technique is also to keep your resume ticking. So in terms of, have you got some other credentials? So what you can then highlight is also your learning agility, that you did these courses, maybe, now you have a lot of courses. So you have upskilled yourself maybe in that time frame. One thing I would not invite anyone to do is be apologetic about the time off, because that again puts us in a defensive position. As opposed to that, you can highlight the potential that you have. So instead of focusing on the gap, highlight on the potential, and that works really well.
Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Akriti, go ahead.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Hello to everyone. Ma'am, I have a question that just now you focused upon the body language, that we should try to not exactly copy, but in order to resonate with the interviewer, we should try to just go about with the body language of the interviewer. So if we immediately copy that, will that not seem like that we are copying the interviewer? It might give a wrong impression, maybe.
I did say don't do it immediately.
Okay.
So it's very subtle. So let's say if the person is leaning back, you don't have to immediately, but just gradually lean back. If the person is coming forward, gradually do that.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, it's called mirroring. You can look it up. It's a very powerful technique of building.
Okay, yes, it is a very good technique, and I'm very happy that I learned something new. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Akriti, go ahead. Akriti?
Ma'am, I've asked a question.
Okay.
Yeah, great. It's okay.
I think Kirti was also there.
I can come in.
Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah.
Vandana. Yes.
Yeah. Good evening, Ms. Rathore. Good evening, Sukirti. We were just discussing, during an interview, we can generally it is asked, what are your achievements and also your failures. It is very easy to discuss about our strengths. But one of the question what came across in your slide was, which was your biggest failure? It is very difficult to discuss your failure and weaknesses, especially in an interview. But because it is a question what is asked, I think it is pertinent for the person to answer that. So how do we, bring it in such a manner that your failure also sounds as a strength? Because in one of the interviews, I was asked, how many memos you have issued? So a very tricky question. Either I answer it and say that, okay, I'm a hard taskmaster, or I underplay it and say, well, first it's a discussion rather than being harsh. So, how do we show or discuss our failures in an interview?
So here are a couple of things. I would invite you to, Dr. Saxena, I'm sure you've had a very illustrious career so far. Let's say you're going for an interview, and what are one or two things maybe that you did not do a great job? But more importantly, what was the lesson that you learned from there? So I'm curious to hear, okay, this is what I did. And this is what I did not do well. And the realization for me was, and therefore the learning is that I need to maybe be a lot more empathetic towards people, for example.
Right.
So for example, for me, I did not build bridges with my ex-boss. I can't blame her. And the learning for me is now going forward that I should really build bridges with my collaborators. I should network a lot more so I have a strong voice. So as long as we can talk about a lesson learned, what we can do differently,
Yeah.
it brings the human side. We are all human.
Yes.
I don't have to
Different perspective to it altogether.
we don't have to put ourselves on a pedestal, right?
Correct. Yeah. Oh, wonderful way you have put it, wonderful, simple and beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless. Thanks.
My pleasure.
Lata and Kirti.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Kirti.
Yeah, hello, ma'am. Thank.
Go ahead, Kirti. You muted yourself. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, hi. We can hear you.
Yeah. Hello, ma'am. Thank you for the talk. I wanted to say that I tend to get a very dry throat when I'm giving an interview. So I just wanted to ask whether is it okay to drink water in between, or will the interviewers think that I'm nervous or something like that?
So of course it's okay to drink water, but don't guzzle it like, if we all understand Hindi, कि प्यासा बैठा है वो बिल्कुल तड़प रहा है पानी के लिए, so don't glug it.
Okay.
So, see, we the point is we make it such a life and death. Oh my God. So in my head, I'm like, it's okay. It's just a job. So that's what I say. It's just a job. So the moment I say it's just a job, it reduces my anxiety. Or I can say, oh my God, it's just a job. So it depends on how we are also having a conversation with ourselves. But perfectly okay to have water before the interview. Please don't have tea, coffee, because it increases the anxiety. So reduce that.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Lata, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I really don't have anything much to ask because I think most of the things were covered. But yeah, I would like to say that, if you talk about your failure, the interviewer might take it negatively.
Look, I can only say we are all human beings and we all come with our defaults. There's none of us who's perfect. And if you're portraying a paragon of perfection, it looks very fake. And people
not perfection, but like supposing that is the one point which the interviewer wants in his company, and that will go against you.
That's where your wisdom comes in, right? So that's what I spoke about, that your research that you have done. what are some of the strengths which could play to the role. So you need to be mindful of, let's say, for example, the role demands deep working. And you're saying that has been my failure. Obviously, it's not going to gel well. So we have to be very mindful and come up with our wisdom. What is the role where we can shine, and what are some of the things we need to be maybe minimizing them? Each
But
job.
is it necessary to speak about your failures? You can avoid it also, unless
No, you can't, because I'll tell you that is the biggest. At least I know I've been through so many, and Shyamli will also correct. That's one of the favorite questions we interviewers like to ask.
Be prepared for it. That's my only request.
mean people.
Be prepared for it. Actually, it's not. You know, I have a different viewpoint on that. It's nobody. It's not the idea to put you down. It's just to see what have you learned from that.
Yeah.
So I would say be prepared so you're not stumbling there. That's all.
This is where I agree with Shyamli, because people want to see that when you're in an uncomfortable situation, how do you handle it?
I think Abhijit has got his hand up.
And before Abhijit, Purnima has asked a question. She's got lots of breaks in her resume. How does she go about it?
So you have to have a story for the breaks, Purnima. I mean, you know, whether it is because of personal reasons. So for example, for me, I had a lot of breaks because my husband was in the Navy and we were traveling, and then I had young kids and I didn't want to work. So I could explain those breaks, but I had to be very thoughtful about the story that I crafted. And also during the breaks, are you doing some upskilling for yourself, if possible? So that's something that you can talk about. You can also, I think, as in today's age and time, there are many companies which are welcoming women back to work after a long time. So we don't have to be too apologetic that I didn't work, because life sometimes takes over and it's okay.
Abhijit, go ahead. I'm asking you to unmute. Go ahead, Abhijit. Abhijit?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It's not a question, it's just would like to acknowledge something, a perspective of trying to acknowledge your failures. It's something very new to me. And I think this is something really wonderful, how you convey across that, yes, you acknowledge your failures and you learn to move ahead, acknowledging that failure. It's something really wonderful that I think all of us could take it as a takeaway from this session. Thank you very much, ma'am, for the.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Shyamli. That was excellent as always. Any closing thoughts as we end for today?
Only closing thoughts are, it's just an interview. It's not life. You know, so let's not get so bogged down by this, and being mindful about. But however, being very mindful about your preparation, because that's where the shining actually comes in when you're actually sitting in your interview.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. And we'd love to get your feedback. We will be sending out a feedback form. So please do fill it out and let us know how we did. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you.